Last time we introduced you to the Gospel according to John, and now we're going to start our Bible study on John by going through the prologue. The prologue is John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, as you can see here on the screen. And it is a beautiful, poetic way for John to start his Gospel. And just because it's poetry doesn't mean that it's not true, doesn't mean that we can't get good theology from it. In this video, I'm going to read the entire prologue to you and then give some preliminary information that I believe is important as we go on into the other videos to talk verse by verse about the prologue, digging deeper into the theology of each verse. And this is from the Holman Christian Standard Bible Translation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him, and apart from him not one thing was created that has been created. Life was in him, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, yet the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man named John who was sent from God. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. The true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was created through him, yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. The Word became flesh and took up residence among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him, and exclaimed, "This is the one of whom I said, the one coming after me has surpassed me, because he existed before me." Indeed, we all received grace after grace from his fullness. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the one and only Son, the one who is at the Father's side. He has revealed him. The first thing I want to talk about here is the word word. In Greek, it's logos, and it has both Greek connotations and Hebrew connotations. And I got this from Mark Strauss's book, Four Portraits, One Jesus. Now, in Greek philosophy, logos is used of the divine reason that brings unity and order to the cosmos, or the world. In the Old Testament, God's word is the dynamic force of his will. If you look at the creation account, you see that God spoke everything into existence. And also, when you start reading some of the later prophets, you will read, "The word of the Lord came to me," whoever the prophet is. And when you look at the interactions a little bit more closely there, I personally believe that it's not just this disembodied voice that's speaking to them, but that it's actually another manifestation of God who has actually come and is talking to them, much like the angel of Yahweh when he shows up and helps Israel fight their battles. This kind of manifestation is also called a theophany. Now, what are some important things about the word here? Well, firstly, the Word has divine attributes. Right? The Word was with God, and we'll discuss that more in the next video. But he also created everything, which will also be discussed in more detail in the next video. But from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, there's only one God. There's only one being who can even come close to being called God. The angels and the demons, who are just fallen angels, they're very powerful beings and very wise and knowledgeable and intelligent, but they are not God. They cannot create things from nothing. They don't know everything there is to know. They cannot tell the future beyond whatever God happens to tell them, right? And unless God gives them a certain ability to do something, they can't do it. But the word here, as we'll talk about more in the next video, is being described with that divine attribute. The word also has life, we're told. Well, only God has life. That is, only God is self-existing and gives life. But here the word is described as giving life. So these various divine attributes are something that we need to think about, and as we go into the next few videos, it will become very important. The next thing we need to look at is that this word became human. Now, Jesus is mentioned at the very end of the prologue, but even if he weren't, just based off of the rest of John's Gospel, we would know that this word and light that became human is Jesus Christ. And then, of course, John's Gospel deals with the ministry of Christ throughout those 3+ years that he ministered to people and taught them. Now, the next thing is that belief in him, in the Word, is important, exceedingly important. It is how we are called children of God, which is basically the equal of salvation, right? Someone who is not a child of God is not saved. And it's not merely a mental assent. Oh yeah, I believe he existed. It's you believe in him, you follow him, and you love and trust him because you want to and because he's done something great for you, but not because you have to, right? There's a fine balance there. That is something that will come out more, not necessarily in the next several videos, but definitely at some point in the Gospel of John, we'll be talking about that. And honestly, we'll be talking about it a lot throughout other New Testament studies, because there's always these two sides that are being balanced, and keeping that balance on a razor's edge is important when it comes to proper theology. When it comes to practice, it's a lot harder to do, and in practice, there's a lot more grace than there is obedience. So that'll make more sense as we come to it. We also have a message of grace and truth that Christ has brought to us. The passage talks about Moses giving us the law, right? And that was where God said, don't do these things, but if you do, then you do the sacrifice to make up for it, or you do this, that, and the other thing to make up for it. And I want to do a video on how Christians should view and interact with the Old Testament law. That might be a little ways down the road, but it is something that is too big of a scope to fit into a video for this particular series, but I will be doing a video on it. For Christ, though, we get grace and mercy, and the Christian message is so different from every other message out there. Now, for atheists, of course, it's just the idea of live how you want to live, do what makes you feel good, as long as you're not hurting others and infringing on their rights as well, right? That's the umbrella atheist position, and nuancing it can be vastly difficult to do even for them. Looking at all of the other religions, though, all of the non-Christian religions, you have some way that is put forth for you to make up for what you've done wrong, right? Sometimes it's making a sacrifice. Sometimes it's going to a certain location and saying certain prayers, various other things that can be done by you in the here and now to make up for what you've done in the here and now. And in other religions, you can be making up for stuff in the here and now that you've done in the here and now, but because of reincarnation, you're also making up for stuff you did in a previous life, and that sort of keeps overflowing into the next life. Now, you can, of course, in their system, get to a higher and higher position in the next life, but you can also get to a lower and lower position. And so those are things that we can talk about in other videos if you're interested in how Christianity relates specifically to other specific religions. But the idea is that all those messages have you doing something to make up for the bad stuff that you have done. In Christianity, there's the realization that we can't make up for what we've done because God requires absolute moral perfection in order for someone to actually be in his presence. And the only way to achieve that is for Christ, who lived a perfect life, to give up that perfect life. Christ has paid our debt on our behalf. We don't have to worry and struggle and all this about whether or not we're saved, as long as we believe in him. And again, that isn't a simple mental assent. Right, here's where the balancing in Christianity comes in. Our saving faith leads us to be doing good things and to not be doing sinful things. Again, I'll go into a lot more detail in that in other videos, but I want you to know that there's that balance. But when you become a Christian and you truly believe in him, the stress of being good enough is gone, because, well, A, you can't be good enough, and B, he's deemed you good enough by being willing to die for you. That is how the Christian message is vastly different. The last thing I want to talk about here about the Word is that the Word reveals God the Father to us. We cannot see God the Father. I do believe that his voice, the Father's voice, was heard in the Old Testament, but that would have been a disembodied voice from heaven. And Christ comes down, and as we see in the Gospels, Jesus and the Father are one, and he says that those who have seen me have seen the Father, and so he reveals who the Father is to us, not by showing us a picture, right, but by acting like him and by teaching like him and giving us his word directly, and so on and so forth. So that's it for our look at the prologue. Next video, we will be looking at verses 1, 2, and 3 here in the prologue a little more deeply, trying to figure out just who exactly the Word was before the Incarnation. So if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments what you thought. Feel free to ask questions down there. I may not be able to get to them, though. You'd be better off sending me an email with your questions, either on this or on anything else biblical or Christianity, or how Christianity might relate to another religion, etc. If you think your family and friends would enjoy this, please share it with them, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you know whenever I post a new video. And until next time, bring on the doubts, because you're always welcome.